Hi, everyone, and welcome to the session, The Real State of MR, Voices from the Frontline. I'm Quirk's News and Content Editor, Marlon Ramirez, and before we get started, let's quickly go over the ways you can participate in today's discussion. You can use the chat tab to interact with other attendees during the session, and you can use the Q&A tab to submit questions for presenters during the session. Our session is brought to you by Discover.ai. Enjoy the presentation.
Hello, thank you all for coming. I'm Sophie. I'm here with Neil and Richard and Sioned and Yasmin, and I'll let them introduce themselves properly in a moment. We're all here to participate in a discussion about the state of our industry today, and we're bringing some different experiences and perspectives together to have a sparky discussion, I hope, about the real state of market research today. Now, to set us off personally, I think the market research industry is at a major kind of turning point, an inflection point. There's always a context to these things. I think the context for us is that we're in a time of real upheaval, environmental upheaval, political upheaval, economic upheaval. And into all of this comes AI as well. So massive technological change that we're living through, something of a perfect storm, in my opinion. And so I think this is a really great moment to pause, reflect, have this conversation. Let me turn to all of you. Can I ask you briefly to introduce yourselves? And at the same time as you introduce yourselves, what I want you to do is just jump into the first question. And that question's all about getting a picture in words of, how you feel spontaneously about the state of the market research industry today. We've been asking people to give us their 3 words, and we've been getting all sorts of different responses. But to give you a bit of a flavour, we've heard words like turbulent, flux, transitionary, nervy, bolshy, dynamic, exciting. So some quite different takes on this. Let me go to Yasmin. What would be your 3 words, Yasmin? And introduce yourself as well, please.
Thank you, Sophie. My name's Yasmin. My background is strategic consultancy, but at the moment I'm heading up Insight at Salomon. Salomon is, if you don't know it, it's a sort of outdoor skiing brand based in Annecy, France. Um, so my first word, the first word that sprung to mind was democratic, simply because there are so many more platforms now. There are so many different ways to analyze. It's cheap, it's quick. I think probably when we all started in research, it was very much, you launch a piece of research and then you spend 6 weeks in the field and then you come back and then you take a month to analyze and then half a year later you're presenting results. I think that's probably over now. So we're looking at something which is open to everybody. It's short, it's snappy. You can get the research and the insights in very, very quickly. And it really is open to a lot more people than just the insight department now. So I think democratic would be my first word.
So lots of change, lots of new tools, lots of possibilities. Okay, that's good.
Yeah. I mean, I would also say, I think the flip side of that would be disjointed. Um, it- I get the impression that at the moment, I mean, you mentioned being at the intersection and everything's changing. I think we're feeling that from a client side, but the agencies we're working with right now, we've got agencies who are really trying to keep pace with everything. They're talking to us in whizzy language about this and that, and this is what's going to happen, and we can do this, and your segmentation can now take a week. And then you have a sort of mid-tier, if you like, that I think are slowly and surely sort of straddling across what was and what will be. And then I think you have a sort of a sort of a lower tier, if you like, that are just sort of slightly outdated and overwhelmed by what's happening. So I do think things are disjointed. I think they're disjointed in the agency world, but also probably in terms of insight professionals as well. So us.
Right.
Because the organization in itself, with this idea of democracy and everyone can do research, it means that it's very easy for research to be split all over the place. So everyone's bringing in insights and everyone's bringing in things to say about the consumer. And that's quite difficult. It's difficult to find the truth. It's difficult to find a common voice. It's difficult to find who the consumer really is amongst all of that stuff that's coming in. So I do think things are disjointed as well at the moment.
Right. Okay. Really interesting. So there's quite a pressure in a way to kind of be in possession of the truth within an organization and to take leadership within an organization on that. That's really interesting. Let's get a different point of view. Neil, what do you think? Don't forget to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Neil. I'm an associate director at Syren. Syren's an independent insight agency, and we're a small team of very experienced director level researchers. I think the word that I keep coming to when I describe the industry right now is actually tense. I think, as you highlighted at the beginning, Sophie, the economic and global uncertainty at the moment, the challenges that Yasmin's highlighted that agencies are having to face on a daily basis. And then the proliferation not just of AI, but all those tools and platforms that are available is causing the industry to really question where it's going and what it should look like, what it should represent. So I think as a result, I think another word I might actually use is confused as well, because when you look at the types of topics that come up in conferences, training events, the LinkedIn posts that get the most traction, it speaks to me of an industry that's really looking for answers about what the next step looks like. Um, Yeah, and finally, I'd probably say it's innovative, though, on a slightly more positive note. So I think times like this also spark innovation and change. And as an agency, certainly we shouldn't be afraid of that. It's a really good time to take stock and question your habits and your practices. I have to say, for me, that doesn't mean necessarily jumping on every bandwagon and shiny new tool that comes out, but really questioning the tools that are out there at the moment that can make our work better, easier, and more efficient as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Neil, sorry, I'm jumping in here, but I would totally agree with that. And one of my words as well was exciting, because it does feel like in this sort of world where everything's changing, there is everything to play for. And it's the opportunity for us to just get new skills.
Mm.
Right. Okay. And all of this echoes some of what we've heard in the board discussion. So there's this sense of being kind of on the brink of something that feels quite big, exciting, but also a bit complex, a bit imperfect, and a bit kind of messy at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of change at the moment, and any technological societal shake-up is going to create a lot of nervousness, speculation, but also invention. And we all look to how we can adapt and stay ahead of the game, but really it takes a cool head, I think, in all of that confusion, to decide what actually matters and what will actually work, and then apply it quickly and seamlessly into what we do.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. That's really clear, I think. Sioned, what do you think?
Yes, I'll also do the intros. Hi, everyone. I'm Sioned, and I'm director of BrainAlly Strategy, a brand strategy consultancy that's helping small and medium-sized businesses put consumers at the heart of their growth strategies and plans. And I've recently left strategic insights and marketing excellence role within a large food and drink multinational, and now having a lot more conversations with smaller, medium-sized businesses, as I said, and seeing that many of these themes are transversal. You know, many of them are coming out, whether you're talking to the big boys or the smaller ones. And for me, the three words, maybe to start, it is that fragmentation. And Yasmin, you touched on this already, but there's just so much choice, whether that be tool, data sources, different platforms that teams can use. It just makes it, whilst easier, as you were saying, it just causes a lot of leaders and teams to feel overwhelmed, and actually making it harder often to pull those insights together and drive for unification so that they can act on behalf of the business questions and pull together a comprehensive strategy. I also the second word for me was volatility. Maybe still in the maybe kind of challenging area, not so positive just yet. But I think there's just so much change, and many kind of insights business partners have always kind of represented, the business challenges, but now they're having to project and hypothesize and foresee more than they have had to do in the past. So an extra kind of skill set there that they're needing to embrace, so that they're not just planning for now, but also kind of projecting and thinking what the future business realities could be, and how the insights that they're discovering can solve for that future, for that situation. And then finally, from my side, yes, kind of the thought of being less human, both in terms of the isolation that insights partners are feeling. They haven't got the same support from agencies. Whilst the agencies are there, if they're using these tools and being more self-serve, they're really kind of struggling to maybe make sense of that, whilst also having a little more of that nervousness around kind of, is the insight representative of the human challenges that are existing in the market. So, I think there's more change going to come in that area, and kind of where the new normal will land, is still to be seen.
Really interesting. So lots of similar refrains there. So definitely this sense of change more widely. It's not just our industry that's changing, it's a lot that's changing, but also the industry. Lots of possibilities, can be overwhelming, can be distracting. And yeah, this notion of what being human brings, or what's lost, with a move away from that, is coming up a lot in all of our wider discussions as well. Richard, let's turn to you. We haven't heard from you. Introduce yourself, and yeah, what would you say on this question?
Hi, I'm Richard. I'm currently the head of ARTD, or Alcoholic RTD Category Expansion, at Suntory Beverage and Food. I spent the first half of my career agency side, and then the second half client side, leading insight and innovation teams at Suntory and companies like Samsung. It's hard to come up with different words to what have already been said. I agree with a lot of the panelists here. I would say, though, that for me, having been in the industry 25 years or more years than I care to remember, I think there's always been this state of sort of existential angst about the industry, about where it's going, where it's been. There's always been a concern about, do we have the right level of influence? Do we sit at the table? Are we strategic enough? There's always been a level of concern about new techniques. I mean, showing my age, I remember when questionnaires were physically punched, hole punches, to calculate data. So I am literally a dinosaur. But I think there's always been that concern. I'm not downplaying the level of change that things like AI are bringing, and the level of transformation, and that's not downplaying any of the concerns. But I think it's almost been a permanent state of affairs within the industry. As it's a constant, I think, is that question of where are we going? Are we evolving in the right way? Are we serving our businesses and our clients in the right way? But I think, on a positive note, I do believe the industry will come out stronger.
Right. Okay. I like that sense of perspective. Maybe it's part of the psyche of a market researcher to be in a state of perpetual questioning and existential angst, Richard. I don't know.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, it's good to have that kind of pragmatism. Okay, let's get on to the next part of the discussion. So one of the things we wanted to do was spend a bit of time focusing on, like, what is great market research? What are some underlying truths that kind of define great market research? So the next question is, what does great insight look like when you find it? And as I say, we've been speaking to a bunch of people with some of these questions. So some of the words we've heard already are things like revelatory, surprising, a discovery. What do you think? Yasmin, I'm going to start with you again. What do you think great insight looks like when you find it?
I think there's this sort of difference between what you think great insight is and what your audience thinks great insight is, because we have this tendency to think, oh God, it has to absolutely be groundbreaking and never heard of, and I don't necessarily think that's the case. So I'll give you an example. We're currently doing some research at the moment with JD Sports, And I just presented some results, and one of the results I presented was, look, in some places, JD Sports is basically the only shop in the town or the village where consumers can get their 3D cues on style and fashion, etc., etc. And when you present that in a place like Annecy, every other shop is a sports boutique. You've got the ski resorts, you've got the mountain shops, you've got the outdoor shops, you've got the running shops. There are boutiques everywhere. And that was a bit of an epiphany moment, I think, for the audience, because it didn't occur to them that there may only just be one shop in the
Right.
town.
That's a
And
great example. That's a great.
yeah, yeah, I find it quite interesting seeing the parallel between what we think and what we want to present, and actually reality of the people that are listening.
Right. So an epiphany can be something almost quite obvious in a way then, but not obvious to the audience.
Yeah,
And I just to jump in, and I think that's where the magic or the requirement of the insights function, normally within an organization is to, what sometimes take what could be quite obvious and help the team see it in a way which creates that kind of moment of aha, or kind of inspiration, yeah, digging beneath the obvious to uncover something that's going to catalyze the brand and the communication team to create something wonderful. And the very classic example here, which I'm sure we all know, is the Dove example, where they were able to uncover something which is hiding in plain sight, that people like women want to feel good about themselves. But then when you uncover that insight in a way which is more real and gritty and kind of impacting women at different ages, that's able to catalyze a campaign, yeah, a decade-long campaign in real beauty, and drive brand growth, as a result of that, and innovations and a lot more kind of brand activity. Yeah, so I think that's a great kind of example of that kind of uncovering what's often obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So something about impacting real business change, right? With kind of commercial longevity to an insight as well.
I also
Okay.
think there's something there about clarity and simplicity. I think good insight always has that clarity and simplicity that means you don't have to work to understand it.
Yeah.
Because when you use that word epiphany, it's like it's immediately, I get it, I understand it. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that is always an attribute of a strong insight, is the audience get it, and they walk away thinking more, what can I do about this or with this, rather than I don't understand this. Can you
Yeah.
explain it to me again?
Yeah.
that's very
Speak for yourself.
true.
Yeah.
Sorry, Steph. I was just going to say that's very true, because I think it's very easy to present insight, and if they don't know what to do with it, it's just redundant. And I sometimes find that we have a tendency to sort of present things in very complicated ways. Particularly when we present trends and societal trends, and so when we present them in very sort of I don't know, very bewitching kind of, with words and storytelling that actually not everybody really understands, and they don't always ask what you mean by that. And so as a result, they walk away and think, well, that was a great performance, but I don't quite know what to do with it, and I really don't know how to link it to my strategy.
Yeah, that Yasmin, I think, is particularly true when you're dealing in cross-cultural businesses or multilingual businesses. That simplicity and of communication is really important.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I,
And
I
that's
completely agree. I mean, great insight. Or it needs to feel intuitive, even if the process of getting there really wasn't, and a lot of hard work has gone behind it. I think a slightly different angle I would take is that the most exciting insights to work on, particularly coming from an agency perspective, is when what you're working on is just one of a number of dots, and then seeing how they join together and being the group that brings that all of those different strands together. I think that's when you genuinely start to learn something new
Yeah.
and start to inform a client in a new way. Those big questions that guide strategy and have real influence are the most satisfying to work on often.
Yeah, and I had a colleague that used to talk about finding the gold, in the information. And often, if it's a several-hour presentation, it's challenging, right? So, whilst I agree it's not necessarily kind of fancy wrapping or over-engineering, there is a clear job for the function to make that sense and then frame it in a way that enables the broader team to pick up on it, to understand it, and then create that spark for it to go and do its job, right, and kind of catalyze the brand or the business forward.
Yeah, one thing that you're all making me think as you're talking, particularly something you said, Neil, about kind of bringing disparate, joining dots or bringing bits together. So one thing that also came up in the other conversations we had was about the need and also the ability for insight to make sense of big data by overlaying kind of personal lived experience. So, those kind of insight truths that come from talking about the lived experience or witnessing the lived experience, which I think is sort of another angle that's really important as we look at technological shift and AI and human and how these things can work together. Okay, good. So if all of those are kind of markers of great insight, given that we're talking here about change and being at a kind of inflection point in the industry, which of these kind of markers of great insight do you think will endure? Will they endure? And what will change? Sioned?
Yeah, but my sense is that the markers will remain similar, but the way by which we will get there will look and feel different. I think as an example, using Gen AI might help us get quicker to connecting those dots. Especially, with one of those challenges that we spoke about up front was the amount of different sources and, the kind of the overwhelm of information sitting in a fragmented way. So, hopeful that the technology can help us to be faster and reduce, the kind of the dwell time in getting to the
Yeah.
insights faster. And yeah, I kind of also think it could help. There must be a prompt out there to help move from this is a great fact to, inspire me or inspire me in the context of this brand, this consumer,
Right.
to kind of create something actionable. So yes, kind of positive and kind of hopeful in
Okay.
that context.
Okay, so basically we're sort of armed with new ways to get to some of the old answers. Neil, what do you think? You're nodding. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, especially from an agency point of view, this comes down to asking ourselves the question, what's the point of what we do? Why are we here? And I think we've already touched.
Existentialism.
Yeah, we're talking about the existential angst again. And I think we've talked around the fact that it's about not just what insights you uncover, but how you communicate that new knowledge in a way that's meaningful and exciting to clients. And I think for me, this is where a lot of the promises about what AI as a means of generating rather than collating insights starts to fall down because right now we really need our own experience and hard-won experience to recognize what good AI outputs look like. You have to be able to recognize the hallucinations, poor prompts, where synthetic data has simply filled a knowledge gap with pure guesswork. You can't do that without knowledge and experience. And I think that's why it's more important than ever to remember the sound principles of good research. It's about properly sourced, rigorous evidence. And I think in some cases, we're actually already seeing AI generated outputs produced by practitioners who don't really know or understand the sources that their insights were drawn from. And I don't want to come across as a Luddite. I do think AI has a massive role to play, but I think we're starting now to develop tools where we've got to be quite careful about bumping up against the limits of what we should feel completely comfortable with doing, and stop being dazzled by how real and accurate the outputs seem on the surface, but to really start questioning them in the same way we question human practitioners and how can we be sure that any new knowledge it's providing is real knowledge in the way that as a human you just intuitively know from what you've done in the past.
Yeah, no, I think that's personally, I really, that really resonates with me. There is sometimes this sense of, oh, look what it can do without sort of stopping to think whether what it can do is like really what you needed it to do. So, okay. maybe a way to land this question actually with in a bit more hard reality is to think about, a market research agency or a market research client, a great one, a client or an agency that you really love. What is it about them that makes them great? No need to mention names, but just, think about who those people are or what that agency or what that client's bringing. Richard.
Well, obviously, I've worked with too many great insight leaders to mention, so I won't mention any names. But I think from my perspective, a good insight leader, whether agency or client side, has always been a good strategic partner. I
Right.
think they have that ability to help leaders, brand leaders, business leaders decipher the signal from the noise, as it's said, and to understand the particular context they're in and to help them effectively just make better decisions.
Right.
I think this kind of individual has also always been unafraid to speak truth to power
Right. Yeah.
and to challenge, maybe in a soft way,
Hmm.
but to challenge, the old, challenging myths and truths. And I don't think this really needs to change. I think this came to me so personally through in my experience when I shifted from agency side to client side. And what was quite, I guess, interesting for me making that jump was actually the realization that from a methodological point of view or a toolkit point of view, the actual difference between agencies wasn't as great as I perhaps had thought it had been when
Right.
sat on the agency side.
Yeah.
We prided ourselves that we were distinctly different, and realized that actually that difference was more marginal than distinct.
Okay.
And I think what really was different was the kind of challenges or problems that each insight leader or agency were really good at solving, and also the way in which they interacted with me as a client. Those were the things that really made the difference. I was really asking myself, what kind of partner would they be? Were they the right choice to tackle a particular challenge? And that sometimes meant that you used a different agency on a different challenge. You didn't
Right.
always stick to the same agency. And I think given what we've all been talking about, the explosion of data, the democratization, the analytical power of AI, I think what will continue to set good insight leaders apart is their ability to be that strategic partner, to be a problem solver, and really, I think, as Neil was touching on before, to ask the right questions, to ask the questions of the data, to ask the right questions of the solution, and to prompt the tools in the right way. I think that's going to be critical.
Right. So about partnership, about help with decision making. Really interesting.
I think, sorry, just to rebound on that, you use the word sort of good strategic partner. Um, for me, the best agencies that I've worked with are the ones that are almost mistaken for an employee. They absolutely know the brand implicitly. And honestly, they're the best ones that I've worked with because they are perfect in the presentations, they're asking the right questions, they've got the right analysis and the right conclusions coming out. So for me, that's really what works the best.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's about collaboration for me, and when as an agency you truly become an extension of the client's team. On the part of clients, that means that they've got to be willing to share and they've got to be willing to talk you through and work through problems together and trust that you as an agency can help manage and communicate their stakeholders as well. So there's a lot of onus on the client relationship as well to do that, but on the other hand, as a part of an agency, it's about investing that time into the relationship and basically accumulating a knowledge pool that you need to operate in that space. And then you stop having a transactional relationship and it moves into something a lot more satisfying and productive for everyone involved.
Mm.
From my point of view, kind of in my last role at PepsiCo, I was working mainly with digitally native research companies. A lot of that meant kind of SaaS type of models where
Yeah.
you weren't getting the full package, as kind of Neil has suggested that Syren brings. But what was important in that capacity was then in-house having people who could then, as I said, kind of could connect those insights together and then apply them in a way that that drove that actionability. And if I kind of reflect, I know not to mention names, but kind of in terms of Discover.ai, one of the things I always appreciated in that capacity was the ability to take that big data, so quantitative input, but then being able to extract more of that qualitative inspiration so that you're able to bring meaning to the data and even kind of take it to a place where it could drive that strategic relevance to drive that impact. So, absolutely, there's a role for, again, both digital and full service, but kind of the magic is when you can bring those to the method and the interpretation together.
It's really interesting because we keep coming back to some very like basic human skills here, right? Partnership, being an ally, helping make the big decisions. This is all really human stuff. It's about relationships and empathy and having like a nose and intuition for stuff. And marrying up kind of what we've learned from our lived human experience with data and with interpretation of data. We're actually well up to the time on our discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.